Modim l'simcha, I want to take a few minutes to talk about Sukkah and Emunah, because Sukkah is really all about Emunah. Emunah is faith, our faith in God. We're supposed to be mindful. We're supposed to think about God's divine protection of the Anei Kavod. When we sit in the Sukkah, we think of the clouds of glory that protected the Jewish people when they left Egypt for the 40 years of travel and encampment in the desert until they got to Israel. And God protected them from the elements, from wild beasts, from their enemies, and that is why they made it through and were able to enter the land. If it wasn't for God watching out and protecting them, they would have never made it. And we're supposed to sit in the Sukkah and remember that it's God that protects us, not these little huts that we build for ourselves, these temporary dwellings. It's not that. We're supposed to be able to look up at the stars and remember it is God who protects us. And looking up at the stars, this is something that we're told we're supposed to be able to do. It reminds us, it's reminiscent of the promise that God made to Avram Avinu in the Brit Ben HaBetarim, in the covenant of the parts. He said, look up at the stars. And he promised Abraham this supernatural promise that he would not only give him descendants, but that the descendants would thrive and they would exist and they would live through these years of exile until they got into the promised land. They would make it there. And our existence throughout history has been like that. It has been these temporary dwellings in the desert, so to speak, meaning we have gone in exile from country to country, from temporary dwelling to temporary dwelling, and we've been kicked out and we go from one place to another, and it's the only reason we've made it through is because of God's divine protection. If it wasn't for that, everybody knows the Jewish people would have perished. We're a miracle. So small in number, so persecuted. The fact that we've made it thousands of years later and got back into the promised land, it's proof positive of God's divine protection and His fulfilling the promise of His taking care of us and making sure that there would be a fruition of this promise. And that is really cause for joy. God promises, and He tells us when He commands us to live in the Sukkot, is so that the generation after generation should know. It should know that it is God who put us in these dwellings. And the fact that God has gotten us this far, and that we're in the birth pangs of Messiah. Okay, we've made it back to Israel, but we still have issues. We're still suffering. We're suffering now from the coronavirus. We suffer from terrorism. We suffer all sorts of difficult things. But if we can hold on, knowing that this is the hard time, the hardest time until we get there, because we're almost there. And if God's taken us this far and had us survive and make it through and shown us such beauty in the land, that end part is it's near, it's around the corner, and that is truly cause for rejoicing. And so I'm going to rejoice in that, and I wish you a moedim l'simcha, and I hope to check in with you again when I have something else to say. Enjoy, take care, Chag Sameach.